You are listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Bolitho, and my regular weekly guests, and we are all here to share the research, the science, and the strategies, as well as some of the fun, to help you to create a more active life. Hello and welcome to this episode of Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Bolitho, and my guest, Danny Clarke. This is a timely episode because it's going out in January, although it will be appropriate any time of year. And we are talking about going alcohol free, which is something a lot of people do for dry January anyway. But also a lot of people kind of decide to cut down or give up after maybe excesses over the festive season. So Danny is an entrepreneur, a businessman, and he runs a company called Peasy Business. So, Danny, tell us a little bit about Peasy Business first.
So we launched the company in 2020, and it was off the back of about an 8-9 year career in the online space still, where we was coaching, training, teaching entrepreneurs how to build an online business. We then moved into the agency, the SaaS, the software model. And it's a company which we're on a mission to be able to help every household in the UK to be able to launch, to grow, to scale their own business. We are big believers in being able to help everyday folk just to be able to make a difference in their life. So to have their own level of independence and to really just breathe that creativity, which I think we all have as individuals. I think there's a little bit of an entrepreneur in every single person. So that's our passion project. But on a day-to-day basis, we're very simply helping people just to run their business in a simpler, easier way, which often means, what's the saying? Simplicity requires great complexity, which I think is true. And I think it's probably true with drinking alcohol as well for some people.
Yeah. But it's weird, isn't it? Because quite often in business, it can get really overwhelming. And I think, if you work for a big company, then you've got systems and you've got departments and you've got very defined roles. But when you're in it on your own, whether there's one or two or three of you, much smaller businesses, there's so much that you have to do. And it's really confusing. And I know that you kind of provide a service, which means, look, here it is. It's in one place. So you don't have to go here and there. And that's really, really important because, particularly when you work on your own, time is precious.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, when we first came into the online space, over a decade ago, we had first year, right place, right time, bit of luck. Yeah, of course, we worked hard and do those things, but we had just a Facebook group. We didn't have a logo. We didn't have a website. We didn't have a sales page. We didn't have a funnel. We didn't have a brand. We had nothing. We had just a Facebook group with lots of enthusiasm and energy. And we made £500,000 in our first 12 months of business. Now, this was from someone who, previously I'd done pretty well in business, but certainly not to that type of level. If I go to today, it's not that easy, but it should be easier, if anything, to build a business because we should always be standing on the shoulders of those who went before us, right? Because someone's already done the hard work, so we don't have to. But we have this very weird thing in the online space where the majority of the people who are the educators and the teachers are people that had that success 2-3 years ago. So it's not a current trend. So there's always like a lag in what people should be learning and doing. There's always a case of, well, it was hard for me, kid, so it's going to be hard for you too. So there's this bit of a weird PTSD thing that gets carried on and pushed on to the next person. You've got to work hard because I did. And also you've got this sense where people are trying to make it harder for other people to join because it's actually a fear mechanism to protect their own business. Because if it's harder for you lot to do what I do, then actually it means it's safer and easier for me to keep where I'm at, which is the complete opposite of where it should be in all levels. So our belief and our passion is just to help people, number one, realize how simple and easy it can be to start a business. And number two, how simple and easy it can be to achieve the results that they're looking to achieve. It's really easy to compare yourself against others sometimes, but, getting real dialed into what do you want to do to help your family, your local community, your wider, your online, your digital community, perhaps, and do so in a way which is fun, sustainable, and brings you happiness and joy.
And that's it. It's so important, isn't it? That collaboration, that sense of community, that sense of cooperation, working together. And you're right, quite often it's kind of like, well, it was hard for me, so I'm not going to make it easy for you. Whereas actually, do you know what? It was hard for me, but because of that, I can show how to make it easier for you. And I think it's something, I'm going to bring it into fitness now, because it's something that I think with activity as well. Sometimes it's, well, I had to go out and do all the runs and I had to climb the mountains, and I'm not going to share with you. But actually, we want that collaboration. We want, oh, actually, look, I found a better way of doing it. I found a quicker way, an easier way, a better way of training. And this, to me, that collaboration, that community is so important, because when, there's a saying, isn't there? A high tide raises all boats. And when we lift each other, we all rise. And that's what we want. So looking then at coming back to activity, one of the things we're talking about here is going alcohol free, or predominantly alcohol free. I'm predominantly alcohol free. It's very, very rare these days, and actually getting rarer, really. But so are you. What kind of made you decide to say, right, do you know what, I'm going to cut back on the alcohol?
Yeah, so it was 2017 for me, where I made the decision to stop drinking alcohol. A big part of that for me was, at the time, my family and I, with the 3 kids, we was traveling around the world. And so this was really tied in with the growth of the business. And it was growth in the business, and we were just hitting limits in the business, these monthly income amounts that we couldn't push past. And you just hear all the time, well, I was hearing all the time anyway, right? Which was new levels, new devils, your business will only grow as much as you. And so I thought, okay, well, now's the time for me to start doing some work on myself. And I was never a big drinker. I was definitely a binge drinker. I was definitely someone who would drink, excessive on a weekend, definitely not every weekend. But if I went out, I went out and I would drink and I would party and I would like as good a time as possible. I'd put myself into everything that I did. But what I learned was, the first couple of times I heard this was on the road, because I was speaking on stages, and I was in Dallas and Vegas and these sort of places, and I was meeting other high achieving individuals. And there was just some patterns of behavior that I started to recognize. Pretty much none of them drank, which to me was crazy, coming from UK, binge drinking kind of mindset. Every time it was an event, every time it was a conference, was an excuse for a piss up and a drink. So heading over to America, and these guys aren't doing that. They're not drinking. They're talking about health. They're talking about well-being. They're about to go and speak on stage. They're bounced on a little mini trampoline for 10 minutes before, so, and they talk about their endorphins. I was like, I've never even heard about this stuff. And at first I was like, oh, is this just kind of wishy-washy? Is this just like silly stuff? And I was maybe a little bit against leaning into it. But then I just kept seeing all of these successful people doing the same. And I thought, well, maybe there's something there. So I thought to myself, well, okay, I'm not going to drink. And so that's what I did. But I kept finding myself wanting to have a drink more. It would be a social event. I feel like, I really want to have a drink. And it felt like a punishment to not have a drink. It'd be a barbecue, not have a drink. And I was like, why not have a drink? And I'm like, I don't really know, apart from I've just seen the successful people not have a drink. And so I hadn't really created any type of connection to it. And so I fell back into a habit of just having a drink every now and then. It was when I was traveling around the world and working on myself that I started to realize that for me, alcohol became a symptom of something. And so I would have a beer at the end of the week. I would have a beer if I felt stressed. I would have a beer if I felt happy. And it wasn't that I actually needed a beer. It was just that actually there was something happening in my life that created that connection of, oh, let's celebrate, let's commiserate, let's do something. And it was the accepted way to be able to do that. Now, for me, I was never really a happy drinker. For me, it would be a drink with stress. And so really that's when the shift started to happen to me, because I realized that actually I'm drinking because I'm overwhelmed. And my personality type is certainly someone who I'm quite stoic. I'm not a big emotional shower. My wife, she's all the emotions, how she shows them. I'm very different to that. Quite stoic, quite quiet. If I'm stressed, I'll go quiet for a couple of days. That's my management style, how I would get through these things. So alcohol for me became a way to avoid having to go through those feelings of, well, why do I feel stressed? Why is this triggering me? Why am I upset? Why do I feel angry about these things? And that for me was where the real journey for not just alcohol, I suppose, but for myself, and it became a byproduct of that, of, well, what are the reasons why you think these things and feel these things and are triggered by these things and have insecurities around these things. And when I started to learn those things, and I look, like all of us, I've still got loads to learn and figure out and, try my best. But that very, very quickly removed any type of necessity to have, alcohol. That's going to be the thing that I'm going to take at that stage. Which for me then, when it came to alcohol, it became very easy to give up and not to do, because there was a reason to not do it, because the reason that I was taking in the first place wasn't even there. It wasn't presenting itself anywhere near as much.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because basically exactly what you describe is a habit. I mean, it's a negative habit, and we've got good habits, we've got neutral habits, we've got negative habits, and alcohol is, especially in the UK, we're very much, I've had a bad day, I'll have a drink. I've had a good day, I'll have a drink. It's a habit. And we don't often stop to think, do I want to drink? Do I need a drink? Why am I choosing to drink? It's just like, oh, it's wine o'clock, it's 6 o'clock, it's the end of the week. I need to wind down. We don't often think, like you say, we don't think, why am I choosing this? And it's
interesting.
It's a habit that we just get into so easily. Everything around, becomes, oh, it's time for a drink, time for this, time for that. And it's very hard sometimes to stop, like you did, and say, hang on a minute, why am I doing this? Why is this happening? Because quite often, like you say, it's associated with good times, it's associated with barbecues, going out for a meal and stuff. So we don't think of it as a negative habit, but actually when it does become a habit, we've lost that kind of, hang on a minute, this isn't right. And
it's interesting that you use the word habit, because one of the people that I got connected with over in America, he was a former alcoholic, 30 years sober. And this guy was just like the most insanely inspirational, motivational, just incredible kind of guy. Still went to AA every single day. Alcohol was a big part of his life and his story and how he talked about it. So you kind of you hear this stuff a lot. And I was very taken by him, just like the kindness that he showed me at the time. As I was talking to him, because, I was never convinced that I had an alcohol problem, because I would maybe binge drink once a month, once every 2 months. I had the kids maybe once every 3 months. And I would hardly drink, in between. And so it never came into my mind that there was an alcohol problem. An alcohol problem for me was like someone who drinks alcohol every day. It's having 4 or 5, having a bottle of whiskey, having a bottle of vodka. That's an alcohol problem. I just, get pissed and shit-faced once every 3 months as a way to chill out or calm out or see the lads, sort of thing. And it was Tom who said, because I use the word habit. I said, it's just a habit that you go out with the lads. He said, is it a habit? And I was like, I think so. Like, what else would it be? And he said, well, is that an addiction? And I was like, well, I don't think so. And he goes, well, could you go without it? And I was like, I don't know. And I felt very insecure in answering that question. I thought, oh God, I feel like I really do need these. But at the time it was, well, it's okay to need those, because it's okay to go out with my friends. It's okay to socialize. It's okay to have a good time. So there was a lot of justification that I would get it. And he wasn't trying in any way to make me feel bad about myself. He was trying to open my mind to my thinking. And I was like, I don't think I could give it up, because I really need it. And then it was, well, why do you need it? And it wasn't about having a good time. It wasn't about friendship and that. It was actually just a way for me to escape. And it was escapism for me. And it's like, well, why do you need to escape from your life? What is it about your life that makes you feel like you have to drink, take drugs, whatever, to escape from that situation, even if it's just a night every 3 months? And that's when, again, it's a lot of that inner work comes up. I had a lot of shame and insecurities and worries, and, just building on those. It wasn't that I was trying to escape my life, because I loved my life. I had a happy marriage, I had kids, I had everything you could want. What I was trying to escape from was actually the feelings that I carried inside of me. It wasn't what I built my life to look, And so that again just became another reason. And it wasn't to not drink alcohol, but it was to avoid using that as a way to ask the questions that I need to ask myself. And so I went fully alcohol-free, sober from 2017 through to maybe last year. I started drinking a little bit, but it was a good 4 or 5 years. Didn't touch a drop of alcohol, and it only changed more recently because it got to a point where I thought to myself, I'd like to have a beer, and I was stopping myself. And then the same way I saw those questions before. Well, why aren't you having a beer? And it wasn't actually because I was worried about all these other things. I was just doing it because that's just what I need to do. So, I'll have a Baileys at Christmas. I might have a beer if the boxing's on. I might watch a Tyson Fury fight or something like that. I might have a beer then. Never want to watch the football, but, so I might have 10 drinks over the course of a year total, something like that. But that feels good and comfortable, and it takes all pressure off, and I don't feel the need to have to be sober as a badge of honor, because it did feel like I was wearing that as a uniform to be able to say I'm sober, because I'm not sure if we said this during a podcast, if it was a conversation beforehand. It's a bit of a trend. And it did start to feel that for me. It feels like I'm saying that to be able to go, I'm sober, rather than actually living a life that was the way that I wanted to live my life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think this is one of the big things, isn't it? It's about choice. And I think going completely alcohol-free, which I did for, ages. Ironically, I'd gained weight through COVID. And although I wasn't drinking a lot, I'd gained weight. So everybody said, look, if you give up alcohol, you'll lose weight and you'll sleep better, because my sleep patterns are shocking. Yeah. And so I thought, I'll try it for a month, and actually I didn't lose any weight. Sleep was as bad as ever. But I noticed that I was more active. I had more clarity in what I was doing. I was better at focusing when I was working on my business. Life was just easier without it. And it kind of went on. But like you, after about a year, 18 months, probably 2 years, I thought, well, actually, I can have a glass of champagne on special occasions, or a glass of red wine if I really fancy it, or a rosé in the garden in the summer with people. But it's very rare now. But when I do, it's because it's part of the experience that I'm having, rather than I want to drink. It's because, it'd be lovely to share this champagne with friends, or this whatever. And, a beer when I'm watching the basketball. So I think it's interesting, isn't it? Is that the going alcohol free often brings you back round to it, but in a much more, because I want to, rather than anything else. It's a choice, rather than kind of being negative about it. I mustn't drink, or I shouldn't drink, or I'm sober, like you say. It's, well, actually, when I do fancy a drink, I'll have one. Yeah. End of story.
Yeah.
So, how did you find it had an impact on the sort of activity you were doing?
When I was drinking alcohol?
When you stopped?
When I stopped,
or before and after?
No, so a lot of people talk about not drinking alcohol because it helps with health benefits, sleep, like things like you mentioned. Like that was a non-thing for me. I was a fit guy, did lots of exercise, still do, did before, did after. I've always slept really well, so there was no real health reasons to do so. I mean, I'm 36 right now. So when I was doing this, which was kind of around my 30s, right? You're still young and fit, right? 29, 30 when I was making these sort of decisions anyway. So it wasn't something. For me, it was all mental. Like that's totally what it was. Even just a simple thing like at the end of the week going, I've worked really hard this week. I'm going to have a beer. I didn't even know what I could have or do instead of that. There wasn't something else. I tried a cup of tea. Well, that's crap. I have a cup of tea, every day. I tried, do I have a this? And so even just finding things to replace what would normally be a situation for alcohol, and not in the fact that it's not a barbecue and a cold beer tastes really good when you're having a barbecue. It's the end of the week. Like, what do you do? Like it perplexed me for quite a while. Like, what do I do here? And so for me, it became more just creating new ways to live and processes and just little acknowledgements and milestones. And it was that stuff that, would come up for me as like a weird thing. Going to the pub and not having a beer. Look, there's some social pressure sometimes, but even that I found most people were pretty acceptable. Going to an event, especially, I still to this day say I don't drink because the pressure of having to drink and everyone else is drinking at an event, like a work conference. I do not want to get involved with that sort of stuff, So it's very useful to actually use as an excuse, and then it's more acceptable. Like people don't really put the pressure on. But I would say it was more the day-to-day stuff of what do you do instead of, where it felt weird for me, and it took some I don't know, just getting used to and just finding new things, to swap and trade those ways, I suppose.
So I know a lot of people find that they get more out of their exercise, their activity when they're not drinking. And in actual fact, a lot of people don't realise that alcohol does have a kind of a significant impact on how we exercise. If you've had, a lot of people will say, "Oh, I'm going to go and work out to get rid of my hangover," and actually that's one of the worst things you can do because it can cause arrhythmias in your heart if you exercise too soon after a heavy session. But particularly, I think a lot of people don't realise it has an impact on our muscles, in that muscle repair, muscle growth doesn't happen as easily, but also the kind of release of energy doesn't happen as much when you've been drinking, and lactic acid, which is, as anyone that exercises will know, lactic acid builds up when you exercise. Doesn't get removed as quickly. Injury time can take longer. Muscle soreness can be worse and take longer. So quite often people notice that actually not just their workouts are better, but their recovery is better. And I think it's something a lot of people I've spoken to have said, I just had no idea, because it wasn't significant, but actually once I stopped drinking, not only could I do more in the gym, but my recovery was much quicker and much better. And I think this is something that a lot of people aren't aware of when it comes to sort of how alcohol impacts on how we exercise and things like that. But it isn't just about activity, is it? It's about, I said about me having just so much more clarity when I don't drink. Even if I've had a bad night's sleep, I've still got that focus. I've got that energy. I can concentrate on what I'm doing. Yeah. And I think but like you say, there's that kind of what do I do instead? And I do think if anyone is thinking of doing dry January or anything like that, or longer, it's, think about that in advance. Don't wait for it to happen and think, what do I do now? What can you do? Can you go for a walk? Can you take time to play a game with the kids? But have something that you can put in its place, because that's often where people kind of, I don't want to use the word fail, but it's where it often they get back into that, is because they've created a gap. And it's that gap, isn't it? Like you said, that it's often the trigger for drinking. It's not because you necessarily want to drink. It's because you kind of haven't done something to distract you from that and change that pattern.
I think there's that side. But I also think, we're coming up to, when this comes out, Christmas would have just happened for people, where alcohol is a way for somebody to become the person that they think they should be. And, you might have a couple of beers because it makes you happier. You might have a glass of wine because it makes you funnier and more relaxed. And there's two ways to consider that. Number one is, if you think you should be something different, well, what could you do that doesn't use alcohol to allow you to be that different person? I would actually probably be more inclined to think, actually, there's a lack of acceptance of who you are as a person. And actually, if you are a bit quieter at parties, that's totally okay to be that way. And so actually, it's more of an acceptance and a happiness of who you are as a person. I certainly used to, when I was younger, I'd drink alcohol because it'd make me more extroverted, more fun. And, I certainly went through a period where I didn't drink, where I mean, I remember, I won't say who it was, but someone kind of close to me who made a thing out of me not drinking. And they said, worst effects of, I remember when you used to be more of a laugh. And that really stung as someone who's going through this thing with alcohol and thing anyway of myself. And that really hurt. Did it in front of everyone, did it in front of all friends and family. It's like, ouch. Like, oh, like, I've still not recovered my relationship with that person. I still don't like, really, I'm still, not people, I don't really talk about it, but it stung, that did. But it takes a period of time to get through to it. But having gone through it, and look, please, no way think this is me preaching, but, just my experience for myself was a lot of it came down to, in the end, was acceptance of who I am, warts and all, what makes me the person I am, and just embracing that. And it really removed for me a lot of the social pressure of having to take alcohol. So, I remember going to like family parties or something. God, we need a beer to be able to talk to this lot. Now I just don't really talk to that lot. And it's fine, and it's one of those where you sometimes put this unnecessary pressure on yourself to be something which you can't sustain. And that's just not a fun way to live your life anyway. So, accept who you are. If there is something that you think you need to change with your personality or your behaviors that can be better, that alcohol helps you to do, we'll find an alternative that's not alcohol. And the only reason that you'd find an alternative is when you remove alcohol, which is something that will, lower inhibitions, which is where mistakes can happen, which, if we're frank about it, is a poison. It does poison your body. If you can find a natural or an alternative to that, that just means that the consequences and the negatives that would come from that won't ever disappear, but they'll be lessened. And I just take the viewpoint of, in life, the journey is, can we become the healthiest, happiest, kindest version of ourselves over time and pass and share forward our knowledge and wisdom that we collect? Like if it's that kind of mindset that you have towards yourself, that, ever evolving growth, then stuff which has less consequence and negativity by consuming it, whether that be unhealthy foods, whether that's too much chocolate, too much sugar, too much, all those things that we're starting to learn, it gives you the opportunity to become the best version of yourself. It's not guaranteed that you could instantly become the best version, because you've got to do the hard work still, but it gives you a better opportunity, I believe.
And that's it, isn't it? And it's for people who sort of say, oh, if I have a couple of drinks, then I'm more relaxed and I feel more comfortable. The problem is, yes, and alcohol lowers your inhibitions, which it doesn't mean that you change. It just means that side of you that normally you might be a bit reluctant to show comes out. But the problem is that might happen after one or two drinks. But it's when you get into 3 and 4, actually, you go a bit too far. And then, of course, you've got that remorse the next day. And being alcohol-free, I've found, means, I'm very much an introvert. I find social settings can be quite daunting for me. And being alcohol-free means I don't stay and then drink too much and get really embarrassed. But it means I have control over when I leave. So, and I'll often say to myself, I will go and I will leave, I will stay for an hour and then I will leave. And if I was drinking, I would just stay and I would drink too much and it would just go horribly wrong. And for me, it's that kind of, it gives me more control over a kind of my social engagement, if you like, and I actually feel more comfortable because of it. But it's like you say, most of us, it's all in us. The things that we are, the things that we don't like about ourselves are within us. And alcohol can kind of blur the lines a little bit sometimes, can't it? But for me as well, I'm more active when I'm not drinking. I do more because I've got this energy and I feel it. And I don't go out running. I'm not a runner, but I will walk. I will go to do some strength exercises and things. And I just feel more like I'm not too tired. I'm not too, I'm aching a bit. I just got a headache and it just feels awful. I'm just active more in my everyday life as a result of not drinking. And that, I said, after the first month, I hadn't lost an ounce of weight. I hadn't had any better sleep. My sleep's still bad, but 3-4 years later, actually I have lost weight and I actually do not think about my weight anymore because it's remained very still. And it isn't just the alcohol, because alcohol obviously is very, very calorific. But also you can't burn off calories as easily when you drink a lot, because your body's too busy trying to get rid of the alcohol. And of course you get the post-alcohol cravings. So I think it's the combination of everything really, really helped me to maintain my weight without thinking about it. And for me, I'm like most people in that, I want an easy life. And actually it makes my life easier, which is a good thing for me.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean, put it this way.
It's interesting, isn't it, though, because everybody has different reasons, and quite often we start going alcohol free because of health, but you find other things that you think, actually, I've gained this. What would you say is your biggest gain from being, I mean, now very low alcohol, but going alcohol free in the first place?
I would say the biggest gain for me is it's a contribution towards the acceptance of myself, and someone who for a long time struggled with being happy and getting happiness. I could do things that would make me happy, but to be happy, like, it was a struggle for me. To now be someone who's very comfortable in his skin and happy and accepting of himself and not drinking alcohol, and basically having no alcohol now, is very much an important part of that journey for me. And I put it this way to anyone who's like listening to this thinking like, should I, shouldn't I? It's so easy, especially this time of year, to go, oh, do you know what, I'm just going to give it a miss for a little bit. What I would say is this: I have never met a single person that gave up alcohol that regrets it. I have met plenty of people who never stopped drinking alcohol who do regret it. And I think, there's knowledge in data, and, there's something to it. And it doesn't mean you have to give it up forever. It doesn't mean that you can't have a drink every now and then. But if you can find a way to reduce, if you can find a way to actually fill in those gaps that you have in your life that alcohol fills, then I would say there's a very high chance that you will be a happier, better person for it on the outcome of that.
And it's so true, isn't it? I do think, like you were saying, that you weren't necessarily drinking a lot, but it was the binge every now and then. I think a lot of people aren't aware of how much that they might sort of, it's a couple of beers, it's a couple of pints, it's a couple of glasses of wine. They're not really aware of how much they're drinking. Alcohol has got much stronger over the years. And I think it always makes me laugh. I do talk about this in some of my courses, is the amount of alcohol, that all the surveys that are done, the amount that people say they drink equates to about 40% of alcohol sales in this country. So either somebody is stockpiling or people are kidding themselves. And this is one thing for me, and a lot of people I've spoken to have said, it wasn't until they did Dry January or Sober October, one of those, it wasn't until they did that they actually realised how much they were drinking. And it wasn't necessarily because of anything they were feeling. They noticed it in their grocery bills and their bank statements, in actual fact. And that was a shocker for some people. It wasn't necessarily the impact it was having on their health. It was just how much money they seemed to have when they were not drinking as well, because it's not a cheap habit, is it? Or a cheap thing to do. No,
it's not a cheap habit. And the funny thing is, I'll have like a Baileys at Christmas. I might have like a glass of red wine on my birthday. I tell you, when you do have it and it's so rare, boy, it tastes better. Like, it tastes wonderful, and it's enjoyable, and it becomes, I think you used the word experience. It is like an experience. You're having a really beautiful meal with your partner, significant other, whatever. You go, oh, rather than just drinking it because, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. Yeah, whatever, Merlot. You're not even thinking about it. It becomes something more, and it becomes a nice thing to do. So it's well, I prefer it. it works for me. So
this is going to be so helpful for people who do want to, and I think, like we said, there is an overall impact on on your health, there's an impact on activity patterns, there's an impact on your business and everything, because you're just much more present. And it's hard to explain, isn't it, if you're not really, if you haven't been there for a while, and it doesn't happen overnight. You don't wake up one morning and go, gosh, this is making such a difference. It's more of a gradual creep that you suddenly, one day you think, actually, I haven't felt like that for a while. And it's not, gosh, I feel better today. It's, I've been feeling better for a while. And it's that sudden realization that actually I can have a drink when I fancy it. I'll make sure it's a good one. But I choose the rest of the time not to. So what would be your number one piece of advice to somebody who is doing dry January or thinking of going alcohol less, if not alcohol free? What would be your one major piece of advice?
So anything where it's an enforced reason to not drink alcohol is never going to be a long-term solution. And so I would say to that person, if there's a reason for you to, if you're curious enough to want to not drink alcohol for a significant period of time, I would also ask yourself the question of why that is. And I would just try to bring awareness to your feeling that you're trying to chase, or the feeling that you're trying to hide away from. Like, what is that feeling? Because there tends to be clues in that feeling. And actually just try to build a little bit of resistance, a little bit of something inside of you that starts to solve that problem that you feel that alcohol, whilst alcohol isn't there. So, dry January, I don't know, this is just hypothetical, but let's say that you drink 5 glasses of wine a week. Well, during dry January, those 4 weeks, if you're able to bring a little bit of happiness to your life in certain areas, if you're able to change some habits, and on the end of dry January, you're only on 2 glasses a week, well, that's an absolute win. And I think it's very easy sometimes in the mindset is you either do one or the other. I'm either drinking or not drinking. And it depends, right? Some people, if you want to drink, that's fine, but maybe drink less. If you drink a little bit next time you do dry January, I tell you what, it's a lot easier to drop from 2 to 0 than it is from 5 to 0. So you can just do it bit by bit by bit. But if you are determined to just cut alcohol out of your life, just be prepared that it's going to bring up a lot of questions for you that you would usually mask with alcohol. And you don't notice it in week 1. Because everyone can miss a weekend, but you notice it by weekend 2, because everybody has had a drink at some point in a 2-week period, because there's just been 2 weekends there. Most people drink at the weekend. If you're drinking during the week, you've definitely had that opportunity. And that's where it starts to come in. If you can get through week 2, week 3 is a bastard, because that one you will really start asking questions to yourself. And if you can get through that one, look, you haven't broken the back of it. It's not forgotten about. You'll still have to fight your demons and sort of work through things. But if you can get through that 3rd, 4th, 5th week, especially start getting through that 5th week, take dry January through to the 1st week of Feb, keep adding on milestones. All you're doing is you're giving yourself another opportunity to win. That sounds a bit cliche to say, but another opportunity to go, I didn't need it, and instead I did this. And, just treat it as that week by week by week by week. And it's amazing how you'll look back 3-6 months later and you think, wow, like, I got to Mother's Day, and then I got to my birthday, and then I got to here, and then, oh my God, it's Christmas, and I've gone the whole year without having a drink. It gets, when you're about 3 months into not drinking alcohol, it becomes a thing in itself, where then you're proud to not drink. So it kind of, it goes from it being, it's a week without alcohol, and it feels like it's, at some point I'll go back into it. It becomes, no, it's 3 months. Imagine how I feel at 6 months. Like it changes from like being a negative to a positive, and you really hold on to it. So there'd be the main things. Try and use it as a way to fill some of those holes that we all carry. And 2, if there's a way that you can start seeing further into the future as a little milestone to continue it, I'm certain that you'll feel better for doing so.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for chatting, and particularly about this, because I think it's something that a lot of people think they can just stop and that's going to be fine. But actually, like you say, it will bring up things, so be prepared. And also find something to do at the time you would normally start to have a drink. Find something else, do something else, because even if that just distracts you, quite often that kind of association goes. So we talked originally about Easy Peasy Business, about making business a lot more simple. Love the name of it, Easy Peasy Business. Where can people find you if they want to know more about what you do for businesses?
Yeah, sure. So if you want to head over to easypeasybusiness.com, then you can find out about everything that we do, including digital software, accelerated training programs. We have done for you business models. We have a whole heap of different things. Like I said at the very beginning, the whole point of what we do is to help business owners have a easier way to be able to build their business. And, most people that we work with tend to be one-man band, 2-3 people working for them. There's a lot. We have to wear about 20, 25 different hats. We have to be the marketer, the accountant, we have to be the salesperson, the tech, all those things. And so we want to help assist as many of those as possible to make your life easier so you can achieve more.
I was going to say, if you're wearing all those hats, it means us entrepreneurs only have to wear one. Which is a big thing. Danny, thank you so much for coming. I'll make sure all your links are in the episode when it goes out. And thank you again for coming along.
My absolute
You've
pleasure.
been listening to me, Sarah Bolitho, and my guest, Danny Clarke from Easy Peasy Business, talking about going alcohol-free. We will see you all very soon, and thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Bolitho, and my guests. Join me each week for more on how to create and sustain everyday activity, and follow me online at Fitness Career Mentor or Fabulous if you're interested in career development and more on creating active lifestyles.